Well, welcome, dear friends, to another episode of Positive Psychiatry with Rakesh Jain. And today, we're focused on perhaps one of the top human traits involved in coping and flourishing. Oh yes, we're going to have a deep conversation on resilience. My name is Dr. Rakesh Jain, and I am so glad to welcome you to this podcast episode. Folks, if you spend any time interacting with modern medicine, like I have, I think everybody has, or the healthcare system at large, you know that we're absolute masters at asking one question. What is wrong? How do we fix it? Aren't we all trained to diagnose disease? We're actually kind of skilled at minimizing symptoms and exaggerating disease. We are real experts at managing dysfunction. And I think I need to be completely clear with you from the very beginning. This is necessary. This is life-saving. But it is only half the story of human life. And traditional psychiatry does take a person who's suffering, a person who's perhaps at -5, and works to bring them back to baseline, say back to zero. But positive psychiatry does ask a fundamentally different question. I would say a far more exciting question, which is, once we are at zero, how do we build the psychological strength to go +5, perhaps even beyond? So today we're going to dedicate our time to a deep, intentional dive into the literal architecture of human resilience. I will, of course, then offer you several suggestions on what we can do to enhance our resilience. I do want to make a promise right off the bat to you. We are not here to talk about toxic positivity. This isn't about empty platitudes or motivational slogans or maybe even telling you to, grin and bear it. Oh no. Oh no. Instead, we're anchoring ourselves in hard science and advanced neurobiology and truly, deeply practical daily rituals. Because these are tools that can literally change the physical structure of our human brain and allowing us to stand firm when the storms of life hit. As the brilliant poet once said, Khalil Gibran, he beautifully said the following: out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. Let's give that a little bit of thought one more time. Out of suffering, meaning even Khalil Gibran and all of us acknowledge that suffering is part of human life. It is going to test us. But those of us who are able to rise are the ones who learn lessons from it and learn the art of resilience to not only come out of that difficulty, but also any future difficulties. Now you see why this episode of Positive Psychiatry is, in fact, personally very important to me. I think the first place to start may be to understand the neurobiology of stress and threat. So before we can begin building a resilient mind, we must understand exactly what we are fighting against. I think we need to look under the hood and examine the brain under acute and chronic stress. Both of them are problems in human life, right? So to visualize this easily into your mind's eye, please think of your central nervous system as a 3-story house. First, let's go down to the basement. This is your amygdala. It is the evolutionary smoke alarm of the human brain. The amygdala does not think. It does not analyze logic. It simply reacts to data. It operates entirely in a high-threat, low-logic state, pumping out distress signals long before our conscious mind even realizes what is happening. Now that we have visited the bottom floor of our mind's house, we now move on to the second floor. We are moving up to the living room on the second floor, and this is our hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as an obsessive librarian. Its sole job is to catalog our past memories and its historical context. Can you see that now? What a stressor hits us, the amygdala screams, and the hippocampus immediately flips through its files to see if the situation is a repeat of past failures or of old trauma. And now that we have visited the second floor, I say we go up to the penthouse. And as we walk up to the penthouse on the top floor, this is our prefrontal cortex. It is the executive officer of our mind. This penthouse is where the executive function, logic, cognitive reappraisal, long-term planning, and emotional regulation live. That was a mouthful. I'm going to repeat it because it's that important. In our prefrontal cortex, which is the chief executive officer of our brain, in this penthouse lives really important functionality of the human brain, like executive function, logic, cognitive reappraisal, long-term planning, and definitely emotional regulation. So here's a vital takeaway. Resilience is not the absolute absence of a basement alarm. A resilient person still feels fear and anxiety and stress, I guess like Khalil Gibran did growing up in Persia. True resilience is measured by the speed and the fluidity and the efficiency with which the penthouse CEO can send an all-clear signal back to the basement smoke alarm. See, in clinical medicine, we call this top-down regulation. And here is the ultimate life-threatening news of modern neuroscience. Our brain is not static. It is, in fact, changeable. It's not like a block of marble at all. It's dynamic. It's living. It's constantly shifting landscape if only we consciously modify it. So when we practice the specific resilience rituals that we'll be covering later, we trigger the release of profoundly important proteins called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I would suggest you think of BDNF as a premium, high-quality fertilizer for our neurons. It helps sprout entirely new connections between neurons, repairs damages or frayed synapses, and literally thickens the gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. So by practicing resilience, we're not just coping, we are literally rewiring our physical neural code. And this neural code is what connects the basement to the second floor to the penthouse and back. You can see why this wiring is so incredibly important. And it does appear the wiring depends on our level of resilience. I say we now shift gears pretty dramatically, and we're going to now talk about the 5 biological pillars of wellness. Now that we've established that the brain can physically change, let's look at the exact daily tools that are required to change that brain's connectome. That's the fancy word for all these connections we're talking about, connectome. I choose to break this down into 5, in many ways, non-negotiable biological pillars. Now, they are deeply interconnected, and when we optimize them, they create a protective shield around our nervous system. I invite you to walk with me through each of these pillars. Okay? So pillar 1 is, I think you're going to guess this correctly, optimized sleep. Folks, we just have to stop viewing sleep as a luxury. It is a biological imperative because it is during deep and REM sleep that our brain activates in this system called the glymphatic system, which is quite literally a plumbing system that washes away the toxic metabolite waste that accumulates during the day in the human brain. That waste clearing system, that plumbing system, is entirely closed when we are awake. So when you and I are trying to knock out those last 10 emails or finish this or that, rather than go to bed, we are literally telling our brain, You are not that important. Go ahead, live in your own sewage. I am not going to do my job clearing things out. Doesn't it sound terrible? Doesn't it? But it is. Optimized sleep is crazy important. And you know what else? REM sleep is the precise time when our brain processes psychological emotional trauma. We practically target all these challenges during sleep, and our goal ought to be to get optimized sleep. What does that mean, though? For some people, it could be 6 hours or 7 hours or 8 hours. It's not the volume of sleep that matters. It really is the satisfaction of sleep, the daytime functioning, what the biological clock is demanding. And this one single behavioral shift, that is optimizing our sleep, lowers baseline cortisol levels and stops our amygdala from living in a hyperactive state. That, dear friends, was pillar 1. What's pillar 2? I somehow think you're going to get this one too, because pillar 2 is mindful movement. Now, you did hear me say mindful movement. I did not say exercise. It could be exercise, but culturally, we think of exercise as I only do it from 4 to 5. I go to the gym. I put on these tight clothes and these expensive shoes. I sweat. I hate doing it, but I do it anyways. Oh no, we're not going there, folks. We certainly can love exercise. I am lucky enough, like many of you, to actually really enjoy certain forms of exercise. But what I'm talking about is mindful movement. So something that we enjoy, maybe something like this, maybe 30 minutes of moderate cardiovascular exercise, what we now call zone 2 cardio, or even basic resistance training. You know what? That acts as a massive trigger for the immediate release of BDNF. Not only that, physical movement elevates dopamine and serotonin naturally. Both of these two neurotransmitters are involved in neurogenesis, mood regulation, and yes, in resilience enhancement. And building physical stamina while training the brain to tolerate short bursts of discomfort ends up being helpful both to the brain and the body. Now, you're probably wondering by now, what is pillar number 3? And you're probably going in your mind, he's going to be talking about nutrition. And you know what? I am. Pillar number 3 is indeed targeted nutrition. And we really need to appreciate the gut-brain axis. Our gastrointestinal system is lined with millions of neurons. Did you know that? Yes, indeed. Our gut is not just a glorified tube designed to absorb nutrients from food, but in fact, it's often called the second brain because it's lined with millions of neurons. And by eating whole foods that are rich in fiber, rich in polyphenols, and packed with omega-3 fatty acids and well-balanced carbohydrate, fat, and protein ratio, we in fact directly reduce systemic neuroinflammation. Yep, what we put in our mouth, what our gut experiences, is in fact what our brain experiences. It's the second brain, for heaven's sake. So yeah, if you're interested in building resilience, this third pillar of optimized targeted nutrition is really important. And when we lower gut inflammation, we do directly optimize the synthesis of critical neurotransmitters like serotonin. Right, can you believe that? We thought serotonin was something that magically arrived in the human brain. Oh no, there's a mind-body relationship. Okay, pillar 4. Yes, indeed. It's mindfulness and meditation. Now, these are not exactly the same thing, but they're both crucial. This is not mystical. For thousands of years, we have been taught mindfulness and meditation. Meditation tends to be more formal. You do it at certain times in certain postures, almost always with your eyes closed. But mindful living is entirely different. It's awareness. It's paying attention to what we're paying attention. It's paying attention to what we're feeling. on our skin, what we are seeing, what we're tasting. Not mystical. In fact, it is not. It's deeply neurobiological. And perhaps as little as 10 to 15 minutes of daily focused breath work can downregulate an overactive neural system, especially when we are living during a threat of reduced resilience. This neural network that is altered is often called the default mode network, something that we have discussed many, many times on previous episodes of this podcast. So the area of the brain responsible for obsessive rumination and worrying, right? These are two things that directly harm resilience, are in fact addressed positively when we are meditating or living a mindful life. Consistency is important though, because consistent meditation has been shown to actually shrink, even on an MRI, it's visible, actually shrink the excessively large amygdala in people who are stressed, who do not have appropriate resilience levels. How amazing, right? And now pillar 5. And the pillar 5 is deep social connection. Not social connection, but deep, meaningful social connection, which I have to say in today's day and age tends to be superficial, transactional. It's a real challenge. But those of us who really believe in the power of resilience truly believe in the power of deep, heart-to-heart social connection with many people. Because we human beings are wired for attachment. And isolation is flagging by our primitive biological standards. And that's a mortal danger to us. We need, well, at least one, but perhaps more high-quality, authentic, vulnerable interactions a day with someone we really care about, because this kind of connection releases a flood of oxytocin. It downregulates the sympathetic nervous system and serves as the ultimate psychological buffer against environmental trauma. So here, I would like to pause just a bit and give you a critical piece of advice. You do not need to be perfect at any of these 5 pillars by tomorrow morning. That's not where we are. No one is. What we want to do is we want to be thoughtful about those 5 pillars, carefully and honestly look at our strengths and weaknesses in those 5 pillars, and do our very best to address them. If we attempt to completely overhaul everything about us all at once, we actually become hypervigilant. We make our amygdala, instead of calming down, highly active. That would be a problem. That's a sudden change that the amygdala will see as an emergency threat, and it'll trigger a profound burnout response. So please don't hurry. It is pacing ourselves as we look at these 5 pillars that matters most. Perhaps I can suggest this to you. Think about perhaps only 2 pillars to optimize this week. Just 2 pillars. Master them. Find your rhythm. Then you move on to the next. Because once you find your rhythm, they no longer work. They are not. They become smooth as silk components of the human life. All right, it's now time to talk about concrete tools on what we can do to enhance our resilience. Are you folks ready for that? I know I am. And let's call this the ABCDE cognitive model. Okay? A, B, C, D, and E. Let me pivot from biology to psychology, and I want to give you a concrete cognitive tool that you can deploy right away. You can, in fact, deploy it in the middle of a life crisis, though that's, of course, not the optimum time to do it. But I guess my message is you can deploy these A, B, C, D, E skills at any time you wish to. So these were developed by several pioneering thought leaders, giants in the world of positive psychology and psychiatry, And this model really is a cognitive reappraisal framework. It's designed to stop a toxic mental tailspin dead in its tracks. I think we may want to visit that phrase again, cognitive reappraisal framework. What does that mean? It sounds cool as all get out, but what does it actually mean? It means the following, quite simply put, that your brain will automatically create thoughts. But by watching our own thoughts, by watching our own bubbling up emotions, we can in fact reappraise them, reevaluate them for truth, validity, and utility. And if they don't fit any of that, then guess what? We argue with ourselves gently and we change it. That's pretty much cognitive reappraisal framework in a nutshell. And this is exactly how we can execute this model when we are beginning to feel panic or stress or feeling like the walls are closing in. Step 1, that's A. What does A stand for? It stands for adversity. So when a crisis hits and our mind wants to catastrophize, stop. Yeah, literally stop. Take one breath, which takes probably 2 to 4 seconds, but that 2 to 4 seconds is sufficient to break the hold of the amygdala on the hippocampus and on the prefrontal cortex. And if you can, write down, either in your mind's eye, so name it, I am stressed about this, or you actually write it down. Look at the hard objective facts. Strip away every single emotional word that your brain is producing to describe it. So, for example, do not write things like, say, my career is over. Write the exact fact. Example could be, the client delayed our project deadline by 2 weeks. Do you see the dramatic difference between, my career is over, to, well, things are not going my way, but the client delayed our project deadline for 2 weeks. There's no reason to automatically think my career is over. Do you see? Same situation, but using a different cognitive reappraisal? Something interesting might happen. What's B? So B stands for belief. Listen closely to the automatic negative thought that instantly starts running through our head when something negative happens. Let's identify that internal script that is whispering. Maybe something like, I'm terrible at project management. I always mess up. And my team thinks I'm like totally incompetent. Notice it. You don't necessarily have to, at this moment, start arguing with yourself, but notice. It's not just the event, but the thought provoked by the event that is of interest. C, what does C stand for? Consequences. Let's acknowledge exactly how that negative internal belief is making us feel and act right now. Are we feeling physically paralyzed? Are we feeling a knot of anxiety in our stomach? Are we feeling like we want to avoid? Go ahead, map the consequence. Are you really going to lose your job? What exactly is the consequence of this event and this belief? And then we go to our turning point, D. I love D because D stands for disputation. This is where we step up and act like an elite defense attorney, a bulldog attorney who is standing up for us. He or she is loudly arguing for our cause. They are loudly arguing against our amygdala. They're loudly arguing against our hippocampus. So we must aggressively argue against our own selves, our own negative belief system, if we have verified hard evidence. Now, if we're feeling terrible because we were on our phone and we ran over someone and they lost their leg, you don't want to dispute it. If you're feeling terrible about what you did, that's based on verifiable good evidence. But oh my gosh, the vast majority of situations when we engage in D, disputation, we find, my mind was building a story and I was buying it without examining it. Disputation is a skill that only gets better with every passing time, folks. So if you're a first year out of law school lawyer, you're good. You're good as a defense attorney, but once you've been in the business for a little bit longer, you get better and better and better at your arguments. Please do consider developing your disputation skill. And then, of course, you want to go towards E. It's not enough to dispute. We now have to energize ourselves. So once this false narrative is systematically dismantled by facts, notice the physical and mental shift that happens in our body. Do you notice? You literally feel like your shoulders don't slump that much. You literally feel that your attitude is more positive, more forgiving. The chest tightness has eased. We move from a state of helpless victimhood into focused, targeted, professional action. A, B, C, D, E. Folks, you just have to try it. And you have to try it over and over again. And the good news is it always works. It always works. I can't think of one time ever if A, B, C, D, E is used appropriately in appropriate situations that it doesn't help. So will you remember that? A, B, C, D, E? I hope you've written it down, or you can go back on this podcast and grab those A, B, C, D, E's and save it with you so that you can use it. You can use it again and again until it literally becomes part of your DNA. We're now going to talk about various dimensions of post-traumatic growth. You know, adversity, as Khalil Gibran said in the one-line quote I offered you, and he wrote that over 100 years ago. Stress is part of human life, but the ones who really grow are the ones who take that stress, find meaning in it, and grow. In today's modern vocabulary, we would just call that post-traumatic growth. So here I want to challenge you folks to look beyond the traditional definition of resilience. I think most people, in my opinion, slightly incorrectly define resilience as simply bouncing back to where they were before a crisis occurred. I find that deeply dissatisfying. Why do I want to bounce back to where I started? I want to bounce higher than where I started. So in positive psychiatry, we aim much higher than a net zero return. We want to witness and achieve post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth occurs when an adversity is so profound, so earth-shattering that it completely breaks down our old worldview. Yeah, and it forces us to reconsider and create a stronger, deeper, more authentic version of who we are. So we don't want to just survive the fire. We actually want to fundamentally be forged by the fire. And we want to be forged into steel. We want to become stronger than the iron ore that started building us in the first place. So we, in fact, thank the stressor because it is that fire that allowed us to be forged into this blade of steel we are, that we can cut through adversity in life. So it's been years of clinical observation that makes me really feel that I'm on the right track, that this advanced level of growth really comes across in 5 distinct human dimensions. I'm really looking forward to describing these 5 distinctly different human dimensions that live in the minds and hearts of people who are highly resilient, which is something I aim to be. And I know for a fact, so do you. So the first dimension is an increased appreciation of life. So when we survive stressors, be they small or they large, our daily priorities undergo a massive reordering. Things that used to annoy us lose their power. and small everyday moments take on immense value. This, dear friends, is appreciation of life. We need to find a way to enhance it. The second one is deeper relationships with others, because trauma has a way of stripping away superficiality. It allows us to develop a profound surge in empathy and cultivating intense, authentic bonds with family, friends, co-workers, society. It's a beautiful thing to develop if you're really interested in enhancing your resilience. The third dimension is identifying new possibilities. So very often when an old door is shut down upon us by adversity, it often forces us to open our eyes to discover entirely new paths, new careers, or deep life goals that we have never had the courage to pursue otherwise. I know people who really pick up art and drawing and music only because their legs failed them. That is a great example of identifying new possibilities, relishing them, and thereby enhancing our resilience. Now, the fourth dimension I wanted to bring to your attention is called personal strength. This is internal, folks. You cannot see this on the biceps of a fellow human being, because this is the development of a quiet, unshakable internal core. It only develops with patience and practice with the skills I told you before, the A, B, C, D, E. It is a voice inside us that looks at new challenges and says, I survived that storm. And because I survived that, I know for a fact I can survive that storm should it happen again. I will even survive a storm that's bigger than that one. That is personal strength. It is one of the most beautiful things to witness, but you can only witness it by being on the inside. And then the final dimension is spiritual change. No, I didn't say religious. It could be religious, for sure. But this is spiritual. This is a movement towards existentialism. It's a deepening of our core values, really a stronger alignment with our ultimate life purpose. And it's a solid anchoring in what truly matters in your life, which will be very different than the next person. So be it. So in summation, I'm talking about 5 things that can change, should change, when we develop enhanced resilience through all the techniques I offered you. Let me recap. Appreciation of life, deeper relationships with others, identifying new possibilities, recognizing personal strengths, and profound spiritual change. So, my friends, as I prepare to bring this podcast to a close, please remember this core rule. Resilience is not built during the chaos of a crisis. Resilience actually is best built on a quiet morning or a quiet evening when absolutely nothing is going wrong. We train in peace so that we can perform better in battle. In order to make what I have shared with you practical and sustainable, I would recommend most strongly to establish daily operational bookends for our mind. So here's a suggestion. The morning bookend is a proactive shield of the day. Maybe spend the first 3 minutes of the day getting some natural sunlight directly into the eyes. Let's anchor our circadian rhythm. Maybe spend no more than the next 3 minutes tracking 3 highly specific gratitudes that flood your mind and your heart. Not just abstract concepts, but tangible things, like maybe the smell of morning coffee or the sound of birds outside. Maybe knowing there's a friend who cares about you, a loved one who cares about you. Maybe think about the fact that you have a bed to lay on. Maybe think of the fact that you didn't have to get up at 3 a.m. to go drive somebody to work. This all forces the human brain to break its evolutionary negative bias. Because what the brain wants to do, Tell me if I'm wrong, folks. The moment you open your eyes, what does it want to do? It wants to think of all the things you have to do, what could go wrong, what needs to be done. Negative. What about this positive bias? And then we spend one final minute in the morning setting a clear psychological intention for the day ahead, whatever that may be. Simple, right? We're talking about 5, 6, 7 minutes. But you got to try it out. And once you do, just watch your resilience grow day by day by day. Now, you may also want to think about your evening bookend or night bookend. That's your decompression chamber. You may want to implement a strict digital sunset by turning off all electronic screens, maybe 60 minutes before bed. I know that's awfully hard to do. Awfully. I'm sitting right in front of you, telling you, looking at you in the eye and telling you, I am not succeeding with that. But is that my intention? To improve? Yes, it is. Am I taking the right steps to improve? Slowly but surely I am. Perfection is not the goal, as we have said before. But attempting thoughtfully, mindfully is indeed the goal. The brain just needs time to naturally synthesize melatonin, and it can do that when it's exposed to electronic light. And finally, just take 2 minutes to offload lingering thoughts as you're about to close your eyes. Stresses and tomorrow's to-do list can wait. They won't go anywhere. Think about something else. Gratitude, of course, always works. This kind of clears our working memory. It's like clearing the cache on your laptop or on your iPhone. You know, all that junk that accumulates. It's like wiping the makeup off our face or brushing our teeth. What we're essentially doing is taking the junk off, whatever. But what about our mind? What about our brain? What about our hippocampus and amygdala? What if I spend just a minute or two doing a little bit of house cleaning right as I'm going to bed? It gives my brain permission to truly rest. So today we've journeyed through the deep architecture of the mind together. Thanks for going with me on the different floors of the human brain. We looked at these 3 structures that live on top of each other in the human brain. 3-floored house. You and I then looked at the incredible power of BDNF. Then we turned our attention to looking at the 5 pillars of wellness. And finally, we learned how to execute the ABCDE model. Because what we want is not just overcoming stress. We want to be stronger, more resilient. And the greatest compliment resilience ever gives a human being, it blesses us with post-traumatic growth. As I may have told some of you folks, I grew up in a part of India, Calcutta. And there is a Nobel Prize-winning writer and poet from there. His name is Rabindranath Tagore. And I want to leave you today with a quote from him that always centers me, my soul, when the road ahead looks, daunting, uncertain, worrisome. This is what he wrote. The faith waiting in the heart of a seed promises a miracle of life, which it cannot prove at once, but it will. That is resilience, my friends. It's a seed. If we enhance our resilience, it's a seed. We don't exactly know how well it'll perform, what it'll do. But the good news is, once you and I have planted the seed and we nurture it, when it's time for it to germinate, as Rabindranath Tagore said, it's a miracle. Give it all the daily rituals it requires, give it the grace it deserves, give it the patience it absolutely needs to grow. We're talking about resilience, of course. And surely we will all benefit from it. Okay, folks, thanks so much for sharing your time and your presence with me today. And until next time, be deeply kind to your mind, stay connected to those who we love, and let's keep building our resilience. This is Dr. Rakesh Jain, wishing you wellness from Positive Psychiatry. Goodbye.